So, if you were paying attention over the weekend, and of course you were a follower of Phil Morehouse on Twitter, you noticed very recently Phil angered, shall we say, Owen Jones, and they had a little bit of an interaction. And Phil said something to Owen Jones, which I think is entirely true. I've been saying this for the longest time that those on the left who were backing Corbyn to the hilt, who still can't get over the fact that he's gone, you know, um, cannot accept that even though there was stuff, and I'm pretty sure me and Phil will agree, there was stuff that Corbyn was doing was good. You know, there were policies I can guarantee we both liked that we would have wanted to see. The problem is, or the problem was the bad. You know, this becomes the problem is that everyone still of these diehard Corbynites, they might say, oh, I'll accept Corbyn was bad there, and there, but they won't accept the responsibility. They won't accept any culpability, no matter how big or involved or may not they might have been in different departments or areas of it. But a lot of people just refuse to see the bad. And because they cannot see the bad, they will never fix the bad. They will never fix those problems. This is why, even though occasionally I will talk about Green Party, Owen Jones, etc., I am never worried that they will get in. Because if they cannot fix the problems of the Corbyn era and the problems that they had, how are they ever going to fix that, even if they decide to attach themselves to a new vehicle? But we ain't talking about that today. Today, shockingly enough, we're talking about Will Atkinson and Conservative Home because he wrote a blog entitled, Are We the Baddies? So let's see if Will Atkinson and Conservative Home, for a moment, can actually be introspective and look at, are they wrong? Were they making missteps? Is there anything that they could maybe ever salvage in opposition? Now, I've said this before, that ain't going to happen. They are going to descend into absolute infighting. And honestly, at least for a decade or more, anyone who does try to look introspectively or do anything like this, or at least be honest, because we'll see how honest Will is about, the missteps of the Conservative Party in a moment, but they ain't going to be welcome. You saw the incredibly negative reaction that David Gauke got for even daring to suggest that Brexit was a bad idea. And of course, the fury that Henry Hill got at both not only David Gauke, but of course Nigel Farage, even suggesting that his own ideas, because, austerity just wasn't done properly. Maybe austerity and the fact how they did austerity may be something they should look at as to why many of the problems that we have today. Will they do it? Of course they won't. And hey, the more they infight, the more it is good for us. So let them fight, roll on the Tory wars. But we will see today how honest can someone like Will Atkinson actually be about trying to do a deep introspective look at his own political party. So, before we go jumping into that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the Buy Me Coffee link, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club down below. And of course, do remember to click the like, the share button, and etc. And thank you very much to everyone who does help support the channel, whether it's like and share buttons or the links down below. So, excellent. Let's crack on today. And this is probably going to be a long one because I can already see I'm at 4 minutes already. So, strap yourselves in. So, we go to Conservative Home with the title of Are We the Baddies? So, let us sit down and begin. After the local elections, I compared the Conservative position to the final scenes of Blackadder Goes Forth. If anything, my suggestion that the general election would resemble a doomed charge across no man's land, resulting in the entire cast being mowed down by machine gun fire, now seems almost too optimistic about the Tory prospects. And such were the joys. Wow. Im- Imagine being, like Will was, well, he still is, those you know, general election days, just after that. Oh, it's like, it's like Blackadder Goes Forth and, they've all been mowed down, by machine gun fire. That's what it's going to be like at a general election. Now he's saying that is too optimistic. God, you can just feel how depressed they are on this. Anyway, he continues, reflecting on an election that launched in the rain and just went downhill from there. Hey, Will, we got 2 more weeks. we got 2 more weeks, and there could be plenty more hill to go down. So don't think you've stopped there yet. But anyway, he continues. I cannot help but feel that Keir Starmer should just have stayed at home, planning for the government, and just let us punch ourselves out in the face with Nigel Farage handing us the towel. Uh, glorious to read stuff like this, especially when we reflect on some of the articles that we've like covered over the years from Will. He seemed so optimistic, so joyous about the wonders of a conservative government and the continuation of what one would be under under Rishi Sunak, and yet here we are now. Anyway, National Service, D-Day, Sky TV, every moment that has cut through to the voters only seems to have further put them off. So too is it with this week's episode of the Tory telenovela, Betgate. Oh, this has cut through even more because it's just reminding people of just how bad the Tories are and how bad they are at sleaze scandals. But there you go. He continues, a stupid name for a stupid scandal. And those wise enough not to have paid any attention, and various Conservative candidates and party officials have now been accused of betting on whether Rishi Sunak would go over the top. 2 are now under investigation by the Gambling Commission alongside our chief data officer. Again, you're trying to say, oh well, those not those wise enough not to pay attention to this scandal. Again, trying to downplay a scandal like this, I don't think Will once again is being honest in how bad this scandal, how bad it is coming across to the general public. But we have seen this many, many times of even from other people writing on Conservative Home, trying to downplay Tory scandals that have come out over the years, saying, you don't pay attention to that. It's nothing. It's a complete nothing burger. Meanwhile, it's completely cutting through to the public, just like Betgate is. Anyway, Saunders is, of course, the wife of Tony Lee. Until a couple of days ago, he was CCHQ's campaign director. He is now on leave of an absence, as he too is now being investigated. Again, it just goes to show you there's fundamentally there is something gone wrong. And if they ever wanted to really sort out their party, they would have to really like have a deep, long, hard look at themselves in the mirror. As I keep on telling you, they ain't going to do that. Will already, by saying, oh, those sensible enough not to, pay attention to this, downplaying a major scandal that is having massive implications that is cutting through right to the public again. But oh well, there you go. Anyway, just 2 weeks out from the 4th of July, this is not tremendous news. PAC's Michael Gove and the reservations are unacceptable, reprehensible, and downright moronic. What were they really worried about? Their post-election incomes. Sunak, of course, has been quick to distance himself. He told the Question Time audience that these allegations make him incredibly angry. Arr, Sunak angry. Arr. Well, what are you going to do about it? You know, if you are that angry, what are you going to do about it? But of course, remember my nickname for Rishi Sunak. He's Rishi Do Nothing Sunak, or Do Nothing Rishi, because that has been his entire premiership. Whenever there has been a scandal, Tory's done something wrong, or anything like that, he hasn't done anything. He's done nothing. Why is he suddenly gonna change now, even though he's incredibly angry? What's gonna change? Anyway, so back to this. And of course, that anyone who has, quote, broken the rules must face the full force of the law. It is hard not to feel sorry for him as a man who has likely never had a flutter. Will Rishi Sunak was a hedge fund manager. Rishi Sunak has had more than enough gambling experience. So he's had more than a flutter. But also interesting that he says must face the full force of the law, because there's plenty of Tory donors, all the PPE stuff. Are they going to face the full force of the law? I hope they do. Because when we get a Labour government, I have a feeling they are going to go after them very particularly hard. Very hard indeed. But hey, we live in hope that happens. But it does seem that they are going to go after them in some way. Maybe not, as hard as I would like, but at least they'll be going after them. At least certainly harder than Rishi Sunak's government. But there you go. After all, people who broke the rules must face the full force of the law. And again, Rishi Sunak hasn't been doing that. Surprise, surprise. Anyway, all these allegations only distract from his Napoleonic retreat into the ever safer Tory seats. He is hoping that the media herd moves on. Very unlikely, Will. Very unlikely. Tory scandals, as we've said many times before. You look at the history of them just for the past couple of years. They have lasted over a period of weeks. Someone else been caught up today, just announced today. We don't know who it is yet because they haven't been named. Also been potentially, I think, investigated by the Gambling Commission. How many more are going to get caught up in this? So, very unlikely the media is going to move on. So, Farage has obviously helped by breaking the national omerta over Ukraine. There was no, certainly, omerta over Ukraine, but there you go. Even if, quote, Betgate sinks beneath the next gaffe, the MRP horror show or the close-up of Taylor Swift's legs leaves the it leaves an undeniable stench. What? What? Why is he having a go at Taylor Swift? That came out of nowhere, but okay. Will now has problems with Taylor Swift. There you go. Anyway, it confirms all the public's worst assumptions about the Tories, that they are incompetent, morally bankrupt, and utterly indefensible. Exactly, Will. Exactly. So you've got to solve fundamentally the problems of those problems. Look at why they are so incompetent, so morally bankrupt, and so when those cause problems, completely, indefensible. We've had to, if you remember the Boris Johnson years of Tories having to go out and defend Boris Johnson, sometimes as new news had broke, having to lie live on air to defend Boris Johnson about new information that they knew had come out, making them look like absolute fools. They have to have, if they are ever to survive, and like I said at the beginning of this, they aren't going to be interested in that. They have to have a very deep, long look at themselves and ask questions they are not going to be comfortable with asking. But until they do that, they ain't ever going to return to power anytime soon. So we have a traditional compact with voters, Will continues. They might suspect that we are self-promoting posh boys and money-grubbing what's-its in politics for no good reasons. But if we are the bastards, at least we haven't been complete bastards, ritually elected to clean up after Labour's latest bout of profligate compassion. The last few years have really ruined what, without complacency, competency, that we are just bastards. I'd go even further than that. But the last Labour government did an incredibly good job dealing us through the 2008 financial crash. And I've said this many, many times before, and I'm really becoming, this is something I think Brown and Alistair Darling should get a lot more credit for, of bringing the UK through the 2008 financial crisis. Like they did. If you look at how Sunak and Hunt did handle this financial crisis versus how, Brown and Darling managed theirs, I think Labour did it a lot better, and a lot more competently. You might disagree with how they did it, but I think they did a lot better job, and I think they deserve a lot more credit for that period than I think they are tend to be given. But anyway, back to this. So we cycled through 3 prime ministers in just as many months, and none proved to be equal to the nation's challenges. Johnson thought regional inequalities could be solved through a few new park benches. Well, it wasn't just a few new park benches. It's the fact that to do it, you had to spend money, and the Conservatives didn't want to spend the money. Maybe something else that they need to fundamentally look at, but there you go. Liz Truss's enthusiasm for markets wasn't matched by their enthusiasm for her. You should also probably talk about the fact that her economic ideology still runs pretty deep in the Tory party. Even Rishi Sunak agrees with a lot of Liz Truss's economic ideology. He just wouldn't have done it as fast. Sunak, of course, set 5 basic metrics to be judged by and then called a general election after barely reaching any of them. Yeah, Sunak's tenure wasn't exactly good because, well, he did nothing. He did nothing. There's a reason why he's do nothing Rishi. So we have been accused of being the most right-wing government in history, whilst hiking taxations to levels not seen since Clement Attlee and presiding over insane levels of immigration. We have failed to turn the cultural clock back a single second. We have made Baxter Basics look like a model of probity. Scandal has followed scandal, sexual misconduct, lobbying, money, and cake. So, how are you going to tackle all these? You're not doing it. And like, oh, we've been accused of being the most right-wing government in history. You are the most right-wing government in history. But there you go. And most gallingly, we have now betrayed those voters who delivered us that in 2019 majority. We promised them that we weren't their father's Tory party. Johnson posed as a Brexit hazard, and that we cared about Britons of both from both parties, and that they had ignored. Austerity was in the bin. We've changed. Honest. Look back. Who can say that was true? At least your father's Tories had a modicum of shame. At least he's being, a bit honest about Boris Johnson. Well, we'll give Will that. That's true. But yeah, in 2019, it was more than just Brexit. A lot of people did put a lot of stock in that levelling up promise from Boris Johnson because they felt they weren't believing the rest of the Tory party. It was Boris Johnson who they were believing. And of course, Johnson didn't deliver on that. Neither did the rest of the Tories that were elected by him up in the north. They're gone. And I would not be surprised if some of those 2019 intakes become the loudest voices against some of the stuff that happened in the Tory party, speaking out what happened, because none of these 2019 people, if you look back when they were first elected, were ever talking about just being a one-term MP. They all wanted to be multi-term stuff. They were all convinced that this was just another new decade of Tory rule, that this was going to usher in some brand new, golden age of prosperity. That these large majorities were almost going to be a permanent fixture of British politics. Here we now are now in 2024. What a difference it makes. What a difference it makes. But anyway, the last 5 years can be summed up as one big act of self-indulgence. We allowed the government to break up because of personal petty rows. Those personal petty rows have been going long before those first 5 years. Long before those first 5 years. But there you go. We partied as the Queen sat alone, and we heard a leadership election during a war and cost of living crisis. You had no other option but to do that. We spaffed the hard-earned reputation for economic management in a pardon me, in a single mini budget. Condescending proved easier than governing. And of course, that was the Liz Truss mini budget, which we've said before. A lot of the Tories talk about taking away the power of the Bank of England. Can you imagine if they'd done that before? Because it was the Bank of England that stepped in to stop a lot of the market crises that were going on with Liz Truss. If they hadn't stepped in and had the power to do what they'd been done, it's really rumored that a lot of the big pension companies in the UK were hours away from going bankrupt. And that, if you'd had pension companies going bankrupt, that would have had seismic. If you thought the economic turbulence was bad after the mini budget, it could have been so much worse. So much worse. And hey, you may like or not like how the Bank of England is governed, etc., whatever, but hey, just be thankful that they were there and they had the power to do what they did, because otherwise it could have been just so much worse. And remember, Tories want to take that power away. So, yeah, something to think on. Oh, dear me. So, it reminds me of another trench-based comedy classic. Readers may, pardon me, may well be familiar with That Mitchell and Webb Look sketch, where David Mitchell and Robert Webb, playing two SS officers, realised that they might have backed the wrong side, pointing out the skull on his cap. A perturbed Mitchell asks his colleague the immortal question: Hans, are we the baddies? And they soon skedaddle. And shockingly, Will is now asking that question himself. Are we the baddies? Let's see how honest Will can be. I mean, he gets it. He's been a bit honest about, Boris Johnson, not totally. I don't think he's been necessarily honest about the full extent about how really committed the Tories were to levelling up. Brexit in itself, something that Will backed, hasn't been the best thing. I mean, you can go back and find a ton of articles that Will wrote back in the day about how wonderful and amazing Brexit was going to be. Again, I'd be fascinated to speak to Will. I'd be fascinated to speak to Will. But again, I doubt it would ever happen. I very much doubt it would ever happen. I don't think he would ever speak to someone like me, but be fascinating to speak to him. Really would. Anyway, back to this. So, this bet gate farrago should prompt a feeling amongst certain Tories comparable to Mitchell's very moment of clarity. Too often, we are willfully blind to just how much we are hated. For those safely ensconced in our few remaining rural redoubts, the general assumption that Conservatives are lower than vermin may not have filtered through. Wake up. 46% of our voters want us wiped out. We really do, Will. We really do. it would be very good to see another party in opposition. I hope it does happen. If the Lib Dems become the main party of opposition, would be wonderful to see. We'll see what happens, of course, come general election night. But would be wonderful to see. Some might argue, of course, that this was forever thus. We can date our history back to the exclusion crisis. We've been defeated before and always bounced back. But this time it is different. In 1997, we still won 27% of the vote, of the 18 to 24-year-old vote. We are currently on 4%. The party is fifth, pardon me, amongst 15 to 25 to 24 to 49-year-olds. Our base is over 70. We are terminally ill. To voters my age, Tory is just an insult. And yeah, they've had this. They've had this problem for so long that they've not changed their demographic crisis. And even if let's say somehow magically Sunak had turned this around, like he'd managed to turn the Tory party around, would have this election been a safe one for the Tories? No, I don't think so. I think demographically, as Will points out here, they would be a dead party. And bear in mind, you've seen on Conservative Home people on here that we've covered crying out saying, we need to do stuff for more younger people. Why aren't we doing it? Why aren't we building more homes? Why aren't we appealing to them? Because if we don't, we're a dead party. They just can't even imagine doing that because they would have to do a lot of things I really don't want to do. A lot of young people, when you look at, again, what they like, socialism and the government being seen as a force for good is the exact opposite to what many of the current Tory party are against, which is, well, we don't really like socialism. We also don't want to see big government because we don't believe in the power of big government. Fundamentally completely different. So back to this. So as I've argued, this is a wider range of generational culture shifts, pardon me, they're not often acknowledged. YIMBYism is not enough when you are a pagan in a Christian world. 2019 might not be a victory from which we might never recover. Based on our unique combination of Brexit and Jeremy Corbyn's awfulness, even Carol Vorderman can't blame us for COVID. We were not dealt an easy hand. But you could have done so much better during COVID. Could have done so much better. Other governments managed not only during COVID, but in the post-COVID environment so much better. Look at, pardon me, look at how education of children during COVID is being handled. Those, COVID children massively behind, and yet you've got, I think it's the Netherlands that is spending like an extra I think £300 on those kids, where our government has shrunk it because, oh, COVID's over. They don't need that support. Where we are going to see, I think, kids during the COVID generation, education be really fluctuate for a couple of years. Really going to fluctuate, I think, for a couple of years. But hey, I'm like I say, I'm not a full, education expert, but it does seem to me, I think we're going to see education really fluctuate over the next couple of years. But hey, we'll see what happens. Like I say, Labour's got to invest, I think, in these COVID kids. But hey, we'll get back to that later or in another video. But we can, of course, be held accountable for how we've handled it and our actions since. Partygate was a breach with voters for whom we have still never recovered. He gets that right. We followed it by sending out the worst prime minister in history to number 10. But those who backed Sunak over Truss must also be honest about our disappointment. Having not yet failed in life, he doesn't seem to be see what ails Britain. Very true. Conservatives massively out of touch with the rest of the UK. Shock horror. Will, touching on that, but what are you going to do to that? How are you going to rectify that problem? Will can talk about it, all problems, but hey, there comes a point where you need some hard medicine, and he doesn't seem to be recommending what medicine that is. So back to this. Of course, a Conservative government does remain preferable to the alternative. A Starmer Uber landslide would extend New Labour's worst excesses and turn the lights out. Okay. Doom and gloom. Oh, if you allow New Labour in, it'll be terrible. It'll be awful. Well, from 1997 till they were in power, the New Labour years weren't overwhelmingly that bad as the Conservatives made it out to be, because you can go back and you can find Conservatives writing the very same thing, saying, oh, don't worry, we'll be back in, the next election because everyone will see how bad New Labour is. They weren't, because the Conservatives were too busy infighting. What do you think is going to happen this time? What have I been telling you all this time? So, we'd run into the looming global conflict with a foreign secretary who received a low record score on Celebrity Mastermind. If you think we're incompetent, you ain't seen nothing yet. Again, really dim view of his own party. A really dim view of his own party. Many right-wingers, especially my age, would point out to the new alternative exists: reform. Going down the reform route will also not help you. And again, those right-wingers, those young Tories who decided to flock to Farage, down that route doesn't lie any more victories. It just brings up more demographic crises that they will have to face, because what's reform going after? It's going after the current Conservative vote. And what has Will himself brought up about the demographic crisis about this? But he does go on to say, but Farage is a false prophet. Has he disappointed anyone who has never... He has disappointed anyone who has ever allied with him. For all his warm words, he lacks any serious interest in governing. Where is his stepping stones? If he ever entered number 10, Whitehall would have him drowning in his sorrows in the Red Line in a week. If you don't know what Stepping Stones is, Stepping Stones was um, basically a big an after battle report almost written by the Conservatives, why they lost that particular 1997 general election. Did they follow Stepping Stones? No. They ignored Stepping Stones for years, and it wasn't until David Cameron came along and adopted some, not all, of the Stepping Stones recommendations did they start, fighting back, and eventually they formed the coalition government, etc., etc. But it still didn't form anything significant. And I will be very interested if there ever is another Stepping Stones. Like, I wonder who's going to be the one to write it. Because it certainly ain't going to be the victor of the first Tory skirmish during the Tory wars. I guarantee you it'll be written by someone, it'll be ignored for years, and then someone will go, well, actually, who knows? But the Tory wars are going to be interesting. Anyway, back to this. Lee Kuan Yew did not come third on I'm a Celebrity. Farage is a negative force, capable of facilitating a Tory wipeout, but unable to actually replace it with anything worthwhile. He will not do the hard work of mapping and causes of Britain's decline and attracting people required to resolve it. He will enter Parliament completely sound off. Pardon me. He will get bored and he will soon fall out with his other Reform MPs elected. In any case, like the proverbial dog, the right will turn back to the Tories. But we will face the greatest existential challenge in our history. July the 4th will bring a whomping that makes 1997 look like a lightly bruised knee. I love it. You're already trying to say, well, look, these are our problems, but you're not really addressing them well. You're not really addressing them, which is why I say they're incapable of any proper self-introspection. There you go. Sunak losing his seat must now be odds on. It's a good result that is not. This good result is not coming third. Expecting double figures, a parliamentary party largely diluted of any talent and a nervous breakdown. I cannot wait. I cannot wait for that, Will. That is going to be amazing to see when that nervous breakdown erupts. But oh boy, it's going to be fun. And I wonder what side Will's going to take during the Tory civil wars. Honestly, it's going to be fun to watch. But we'll see in the future. So the challenges we will face will, of course, be threefold. Recovering, assembling the talent to govern even a smidgen more effectively than we've managed, and convincing a disillusioned electorate to give us one last chance. Britain is crying out for a conservative revolution. I don't think they are. They're crying out for something, but not a conservative revolution that makes Margaret Thatcher look tiny by comparison. Can we deliver? I would struggle to say yes amid this dumpster fire. Yeah, Britain is not crying out for a conservative revolution. It's definitely crying out for something, but not a conservative one. You can even see it in the polls by what people want, by the fact that Will's own party really, really do like having all these, public services and are quite happy paying higher taxes for them. A conservative revolution would get rid of that. But there you go. It is hard to think that we will ever have a conservative government again. The odds are long, but hope springs eternal. Within 15 years of Labour being reduced to 52 seats in 1931, Attlee had a landslide majority and the ability to reshape the post-war Britain in his admirably miserable image. The Alley government did a lot of very good things there, Will, but never mind. We don't have time to go into that for the moment, but yeah. Okay, as it did, alas, take a war to get there. But the next few years are unlikely to be short of those. Things will get very much worse before they have even a hope of getting better. Labour will implode in government. Again, they hope. This is one of the things that you're hearing a lot of Tories say that, oh my God, once Labour get in, they're going to implode in government. They're going to they're going to have all these undelivered promises. Uh, Labour do not seem to have any of the problems that you're going in that plagued the Tory party for years. It's likely there will be some infighting. I won't deny that. But I think, as I've said before, if the progressive forces in the Labour Party are smart about it, if they are smart about it and they pick their battles carefully and decisively, they will be able to pull off, I think, a lot of progressive victories. And maybe they'll not get everything, but there will be, I think, some very, very good progressive victories. So, hey, I've keep on talking about that before, but anyway, back to this. 70 or so, of course, remaining MPs will now spend years, again, more like decades, pointing fingers at each other through the helpful medium of the right-wing entertainment industry. It'll be a boon time for us commentators, but miserable for all involved. But if any good will come of this defeat, we need to start with the collective acknowledgement that we are responsible for our plight. Well, I'm glad you're at least acknowledging that. But again, you need to look at your policies. It's not just all these scandals that Will's been talking about. What about right to buy? What about what? Sorry, not right to buy, but help to buy. But if you look at it, has not only not helped first-time buyers get on the housing market, but has enriched the house builders from that program. And then those first-time buyers, when they've had their very shoddily built first house, have then discovered that the house isn't worth as much as it was being told. So then they found themselves in problem that even though they used Help to Buy for the first time, they are now then struggling to then move on from that house. Renting, another seismic problem that we have seen, people try to sort of deal with over the years, definitely needs something doing. Rent controls would be something that I would like to see brought in. You know, they are not willing, and you've even seen it here. There's been very, very little talk about what the Conservatives actually done. Just, oh, it's all these scandals, all these things. That's what did us in. But everything else we were doing, no, that's fine. Remember what I've said about all this through all this article saying, oh yeah, do you want, oh, we're gonna have a real good look at ourselves. No, it's not. It's not even happening because Will isn't even being honest to look at what they were doing. They are not. They are not looking at what they were doing. They are still obsessed. It was the ideology. Our ideology was right and correct, and they ignored everything else. I keep on saying it, but they are not going to look properly at the reasons why they're wrong, which was their ideology, their strict diligence to dogma, continuing stuff which they knew was wrong, when their advisor was saying, well, hold on, this is going to be wrong, when the civil service was coming up and saying, well, actually, this is going to cause this problem, they ignored that. They are not looking at that. But Stepping Stones did look at the problems of policy. Will here hasn't looked at a single policy. He mentioned, leveling up and Brexit, but he didn't go into any detail about why leveling up failed or why Brexit went all a bit wrong. So even though this, or well, at least Will would think he's had a good introspective look at the Conservative Party, This has only been skin deep. Will has been far too relaxed, shall we say, about having a quick, sneaky look in the mirror. Because if he stared any longer, then he might see the reflection staring back at him is not something he might want to see. But just a quick look. Oh, just all those scandals. It's very telling that that's what he thinks was the problem. The scandals. Everything else was fine. I think even if you were to, let's say, every single Tory scandal did not happen. Partygate never happened. Were the Tories any good? No. Like every single measurable metric, they were just not good. They were not good at governing. The policies, made problems infinitely worse. Some things, as we said, helped to buy. Massive contributors to the housing crisis. What's in the Conservative manifesto? More Help to Buy 2.0, which again would not help anyone get on the housing market. But there you go. Anyway, let's finish this off then. So we start with the collective knowledge that we're responsible for our plight, and until we understand just why the electorate is so sick of us, so desperate to bring about an end to 14 wasted years, all our posturing and postulating will be for naught. Until we actually understand why voters think we're the baddies, we can do no good. And yet, that conversation with voters will not take place. Because the Conservatives will not be interested in having that conversation. They will not be interested in having that conversation because they will be too busy infighting amongst themselves. This very un-Tory civil war that's about to break out is going to be insane. It is going to be crazy, but hey, you have to take sides. You have to take sides, Will, and even he is going to have to pick a side in this Tory civil war. So it'll be interesting to see which side he comes down on. But hey, don't get me wrong, we will still be covering Conservative Home because the Conservative Civil War is going to take place there. It's going to be one of the main factors for all the civil warring that will take place. GB News as well. Oh my word, that'll be fun. But yeah, oh well, it's been a bit of a long one. This one, I told you it was going to be a long one, but yeah, an introspective look, but it was only it was barely even skin deep. And to me, it came across that Will was more saying that, oh, if only we hadn't had those scandals, if only that hadn't happened, if only, this betting scandal hadn't happened, or Partygate hadn't happened, or, we hadn't changed prime ministers so many times, we'd all be fine. He's not even willing to tackle the main thing that's been the biggest plague on the Conservative Party, and that is the rigid adherence to free market fundamentalism. That if they follow this route, everything will be fine. But what happens when they're walking on this road? Oh, well, there's a pothole here. No, that pothole's not there. It's not on the map. It must be on the wrong road. So they can't acknowledge reality. If you really wanted to get the UK working, and it's been said many times before, if Boris Johnson had been serious and he got the rest of the Tory party actually on board with levelling up, would have actually been quite successful. The levelling up white paper, the first 2 chapters spelled out levelling up shockingly and clearly, and what the UK actually needed to achieve proper levelling up. Of course, as we said, you get to the Treasury chapter, who was responsible for that, Rishi Sunak, didn't even give the money that the first 2 chapters talked about needing to achieve proper levelling up. No matter how many times the Tory party will talk about changing in the next few years or doing things different, they're not going to change. because they're going to be navel gazing, infighting, and it's going to be fantastic to watch. And honestly, after the general election, the first couple of weeks, boy, is it going to be fun. And then the leadership election that will take place, that will be fun. But oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Who gets left behind? Who will throw their hat in the ring? Who knows? But it's going to be fun. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you thought. Do you think that was an actual serious examination of the Tory party? Because I don't. I think that barely even scratched the surface. Will there, to me, seem to be saying, again, oh, if all those scandals hadn't happened, we'd be fine. But of course, never even talked a bit about, Tory policy that had been, fundamentally doing some of the biggest damage that they've been in charge for 14 years of doing. But there you go. So, anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, do remember to click on the like, the share button, links down below. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.